Theresa May thought she made a breakthrough with her Brexit strategy. Instead, 2 out of 3 pro-Brexit ministers have abandoned her team, threatening to derail all her efforts. Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson and Brexit Secretary David Davis left their posts within hours of each other in protest over May's plans, but she took to Parliament to defend them.
And we've agreed an implementation period which will provide businesses and governments the time to prepare for our future relationship with the EU. But on the nature of that future relationship, the 2 models that are on offer from the EU are simply not acceptable.
The agreement contains no plan to protect our service industry, no plan to prevent a hard border in Northern Ireland, and also put forward the idea of regulatory flexibility.
Under May's plan, Britain and the EU would establish a common trade rulebook for industrial and agricultural goods. It would ensure frictionless trade with the EU on the Irish border. It also proposes a new customs arrangement to be phased in. It would remove the need for customs control between the UK and the EU. There are worries Johnson and Davis's resignation could further worsen tensions in the government's ranks. The departures create another hurdle for May. New Brexit Secretary Dominic Raab will have to win the support of pro-Brexiters in the Conservative Party.
The Cabinet agreed that we need to present the EU with a new model, evolving the position that I had set out in my Mansion House speech, so that we can accelerate negotiations over the summer, secure that new relationship in the autumn, pass the withdrawal and implementation bill and leave the European Union on the 29th of March 2019.
Despite initially rallying following Davis's resignation, the British pound lost some ground in the afternoon trade after Johnson stepped down. And major corporations are making similar bets. Many are exiting Britain and moving into European cities instead. Financial giants BlackRock and Citigroup on Sunday revealed plans to set up new offices in Paris, which would create hundreds of jobs there. They join a growing list of banks doing the same: Bank of America, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, and HSBC. And that's adding more pressure for May's government to avoid a bitter divorce with the EU, with only 9 months left on the Brexit clock. Laila Humairah, TRT World.
So, lots to digest. With us now is TRT World's editor-at-large, Craig Copetas, in Paris. But first, let's bring in Vicky Pryce. She's the Chief Economic Advisor at the Centre for Economics and Business Research in London. Welcome to you both, Craig, Vicky. Vicky, I want to start with you first, if I may. Let's talk about the pound first. It had been up against the dollar for most of the day after the resignation of David Davis. After the resignation of Boris Johnson, it's slumped. What is the market trying to say to us? I mean, are they basically saying that they think that Theresa May could have survived without David Davis, but perhaps not without Boris Johnson?
Well, yes, I think the expectation has been since the Chequers meeting last weekend, last Friday, that we were really moving towards a soft Brexit. And that, of course, is good for the economy because it keeps us much closer to the EU. There was confidence that the border issue with Northern Ireland would have been sorted out as well as a result of that. And that probably there were going to be even more concessions in the months ahead, which would have been pretty good for British business more generally. Then, of course, the David Davis resignation itself was viewed in the markets as actually making that even clearer, because he was a Brexiter and he was actually supposedly running the negotiations with the EU. With him gone, then even more likely that one would be moving towards that type of ideal situation where at least the UK would not have left the EU very abruptly, but actually would be as close as we could possibly manage after Brexit. And then, of course, Johnson goes, and then people start talking about a leadership contest, about the possibility of a no-confidence vote for Theresa May. So the stakes have gone up, and the markets have been a little bit worried about that.
Take us through, if you would, what this latest plan actually is and how it's different from previous plans. And why you consider this a softer version of Brexit?
The most important development, if you like, from everything that's been said before is that for goods, certainly, we would be moving practically towards having a customs union and a single market, in the sense that we would accept, it's not the words she used, of course, but we would be accepting the rule book of the EU in anything to do with trade in goods and also agriculture. That, of course, means there will be no checks at the border because we are following the regulatory principles, if you like, of the EU. And that would make life considerably easier for everyone who wants to trade, but also would solve the question of having a border in Northern Ireland. And that was quite a respectable way forward. It doesn't mean that the EU was going to accept it, because it means having the single market, if you like, for one part of what the EU does, and not having a single market in services. And that, of course, is not acceptable to the EU more generally. But there will still be some restrictions on people coming in from the EU, supposedly, because freedom of movement would stop. But in fact, we would have a special relationship with people who wanted to come and work and study in the UK, which will be effectively like accepting everyone who wants to come into this country. Right. So it wasn't a bad deal overall, but of course it meant picking and choosing the things that we like, and perhaps ditching some other stuff, which the EU was bound to find some difficulty with. Yeah, this is the problem. What I can't wrap my head around is that people like Michael Gove, Boris Johnson, David Davis, they all signed up to this initially on after it was announced on Friday. So what happened between then and today? It's a very good question. It was a great surprise to all of us. You know, we all went to bed thinking that everything would be fine, woke up to discover that David Davis had gone. But of course, he would have to negotiate between now and October, certainly, if not longer, with the EU, this deal that he was not very happy about anyway, and he had said that very clearly at the Chequers meeting, apparently. But of course, he realised that in order to get anywhere with the EU, he would have to make loads more concessions. Right. And he had threatened to resign before, at least that's what we understand. And then he decided that actually he couldn't possibly sell that deal to anyone. Now, maybe that, or there could have been some agreement, actually, of a number of them to resign en masse. But we'll see what happens next. It's going to be very interesting. Craig, I want to bring you into the discussion. What is the chance that, that the Europeans are going to be more amenable to this latest proposal from Theresa May?
Well, look, let's get one thing straight here. This Feldercarb is exclusively in the UK. Brussels has seen more of Gareth Southgate and Harry Kane than they have of David Davis and Boris Johnson. David Davis spent a whole total of 4 hours, I believe, there in negotiations. Look, the European media and politicians don't care about this. They see this as a squabble between Etonian teenagers and populist radio hosts who have created a dystopia and a chaos, and that this argument is being carried out in the clubs of boodles and whites, which should lead us to ask whether upon the whole earth there's anything so intelligent, so unapt to perceive how the world is really going as the British upper class. They're not paying attention to this. Craig, while we're in Paris, French President Emmanuel Macron's problems are also mounting up. He's facing some more protests over there. What are they trying to achieve today? Well, Macron said he's going to be spending 15 billion euros over the next 5 years to train 1 million young people, a sort of ersatz affirmative action program. But look, Brexit was not far from his lips. He mentioned it in his speech at Versailles. He said we must be even stronger with the UK leaving the European Union. And he perceived their departure. He framed it as a threat. So look, what they want here, England, Britain, go away, pay us what you owe us. trade's going to continue.
Right. Almost out of time. Vicky, I want to just throw a final question to you. The new Brexit Minister, Dominic Raab, he's 44, Cambridge and Oxford educated, also has a karate black belt, apparently. What chances do you give him in these negotiations that are coming up with the EU?
Well, the truth is that most of the negotiations have been happening, just as you've been hearing from Greg, not by David Davis, who was, of course, the one who had the job that Dominic Raab now has, as of the last few hours. But it is done by the civil servants. There is a gentleman called Ollie Robbins, who is the trusted person who's doing all the negotiations on behalf of Theresa May. It is true that it's Theresa May who is pushing the lines. For anyone who's looking at this though, right now in the UK, intending to invest, looking at the economy and wondering what's going to happen next, it has added hugely to complications, and I do not think that Dominic Raab is going to be able to just sort this out easily at all.
OK, we are going to have to leave it there. Both Vicky Pryce, economist, and Craig Copetas, thank you both very much indeed.